Hey everyone, Dan here. Today we're going to look at 5 stocks that are under 30 bucks. Specifically, they're between 20 and 30 bucks, and look at sort of some potential setups for them in the near future. If you do hear some loud banging or screaming, I have young children, and this is just the way of the world, so please bear with me. I'll do my best to edit it out, but just in case, that's what you're hearing. Okay, so Plug is my first one that I wanted to look at. All of these stocks today, just to get sort of like some context, we're going to look at the 3-month chart, which means that we're looking at 2-hour time frames. So for Plug, it's caught in this long-standing down channel. That started all the way up over $75, so it's about a third of that price right now. At this 27.20 that you see here. And so, it's taken quite a walloping, but has held this channel throughout. So, that's potentially interesting. And, let's kick things off with looking at this gap that I'm just seeing. So one thing that you may want to look at is, that gap would get you up to about $50. And obviously it would mean that it broke the channel, like in the very near future. So keep an eye on that gap. I don't know for certain that gap is a frequent, that Plug is a frequent gap filler, but if it is, that gives us something to look at. I could take a look and follow up with that on my Twitter, or if you drop me a comment and you really want to know, if you can't decipher, then I could answer it in the comment below. But what I wanted to draw folks' attention to is a couple of things with the channel. So one, it's very close to the top of the channel. It's been repeatedly testing the top of the channel, or the upper bound of the channel recently, and it's sort of leading me to believe that it might be breaking out sooner than later. So I just wanted to draw folks' attention to that. The other thing is, for me, I don't have a position, but if I did, I would keep like a pretty tight cut loss on here. Potentially that 25.74. I have it right now as a cautionary zone, but I could see that as like a much more aggressive stop loss. If you wanted to give a little more wiggle room, that 24.68 should hold. But if it doesn't, I would consider. So in any case, if it fell through those and stayed in the channel, then it wouldn't have ever broken out of the channel anyway. There's always the chance that it comes out of the channel and then comes down to test one of these. Not my favorite thing for it to do. We want to see it come out of a channel strong, because oftentimes we see these weak plays come out of a channel and then just end up sinking down next to the channel as opposed to inside the channel, which doesn't do anyone any favors. But to be clear on that 25 and that 24 price zone, that goes all the way back to here. So we have a lot of supply and demand zones that were wrapped up in this area. Here's this back in November and then through December. So that's long standing. And that also preceded, as did this $36.99, what we'll just call $37 price target. These things were integral pieces of the puzzle for this big push up that got all the way to 75 bucks from 25. So the tripling of the price happened in those price targets. I'm hoping that the stopping of the thirding of the price halts there. And then, I would put like an initial price target if I were to take a position on this at that $37 level, for the reasons that we just discussed, plus that price is still being influential in recent price activity. So that's what I look for from Plug. Dropbox, I played a long time ago, but haven't looked at it in a while, and happened to see that it was pretty cheap. So Dropbox to me is basically just kind of flagging out potentially, and it's walking itself up this trend line at the moment. It's going to collide with this down trend line potentially, and so I would look for a collision point there and see if it is able to push out to the upper side and work its way north. If we get ourselves out to the 3 months, you'll see it had worked itself up, and the initial push off that got it to 29 bucks from 20. So basically, again, another instance where it gained third, or I guess 1.5 times its price essentially in that move, that trend line is still holding at the moment. So we'll see what happens there. On the indicators front, we take a look at the MACD. The bearish sentiment that we see here is waning. The bullish sentiment is holding relatively steady. So I would look for some real estate to develop between the signal and the MACD line to give us a little space like we saw here to give us some good pushes up. But yeah, bearish sentiment seems to generally be waning all the way since like the initial drop down. It picked up some steam, and then ever since then, it's been losing steam. So I'm looking for it to really just kind of like give up and for the bullish sentiment to take over. On the RSI, it's mid-range, so that shouldn't interfere with it being able to hold this trend line up, even if it doesn't do a more aggressive push to test that downtrend resistance. All right. Space, one of my favorite stocks to play on both the bullish and the bearish side. The thing that stood out to me with Space, obviously taking this big beat down, but it has really long-standing support right around where it is right now. So this 22, let me see what that is. Is it 2277? Let's call it 2277. It goes all the way back here, and this was January and December. And even then, it was sort of like really quick resistance that turned to support. That then gave it this big push up to the mid 30s initially. But this was resistance and then support way back here. So it has a long history of this area being consequential. And so what I would look for is for it to start building something off of that. I don't have a position. If I were to take one, I would look for something to indicate strength on the MACD. It did recently cross over. So if that continues, and that's a pretty solidly steep crossover. So if that crossover holds and there's this much real estate that's going to expand as we go up, I would consider taking a position. It's really cheap in my opinion. And so with that MACD crossover, that could be the sort of like string to pull on at the moment to get some bullish momentum going. It's going to need it because the bearish momentum has held pretty strong. It's been increasing a little bit. And so we'll see what this crossover can give us. But if I did take a position, I would keep like a really tight stop loss underneath that 2280, basically saying if it can't hold that or rebuild it really quickly, if it does dip below, then I'd have pretty low tolerance level for holding it below that area. All right, we could check the RSI, but it's going to be low. Yeah, RSI is already saying oversold. So RSI oversold, MACD crossing over the signal could be a really good time to think about entering space and just keep a very tight stop loss on it. Norwegian Cruise Lines, obviously one of the more harder hit stocks from the COVID pandemic. And so it had this big run up and then got beat down really hard and then had tried to recover and then got beat down again. And so right now it's doing this like very long-term flagging out, but it's caught under the weight of this resistance line, but it's been trying to pick up some support. So I gave it a little bit of leeway here. I think that if it can hold support on this line, because it lines up with this gap here that I saw, that might give it the opportunity to still break out of this downtrend resistance and work itself into some greener pastures. On the MACD side, the bearish momentum is beginning to wane, so that's good. It's very minimal at the moment, but we do need the bullish sentiment to start picking up. The MACD is also about to cross over the signal, so if that plays out, that could give us a really quick test of this resistance downtrend, and that to me could be a good signal for an entry point, crossover, break of downtrend. On the RSI front, 38, we should anticipate anything that's been beaten down like this to have a low RSI, so it shouldn't play a factor either way. Okay, so lastly, this one is new to me, but BLDP, Ballard Power. This is like how it lost half of its price, so from 42 down to 21 today. If we zoom in a little bit and go a little bit more near term on this one, since the end of March, so for all of April, it's been in this pretty steep downtrend. And it may have just bounced off of this 2023, which we saw is supported here, and actually is supported here because oftentimes when a stock comes down for a first retest, it'll stop short. And so it stopped short there twice, which is good. But this price dates back all the way to all these support and resistance zones here, and then was the pushing off point, as was just call it $22. So this 2023 plus 22, so that's another one to look at as things evolve. If this becomes anything, I'd look here. I would look here. Okay. But those two price points were the ones that were really the push-off zones for this big run-up that ultimately got it to 42. This 1834 we see back here is long-term support that I would expect to hold. So if I did take a position, that still is a pretty big loss, like 10% or so down. But, that's sort of like where it's up to you. That 2023, you could also treat that as a stop loss zone. You could also just wait until BLDP breaks out of this down channel, and as long as it doesn't start to do the thing where it just continues down outside of the channel, then that could be your signal to buy. Speaking of signals, on the MACD front, recent crossover on the MACD, so good sign there. Bear sentiment coming down slightly, though it's a little bit, waffling back and forth. The bullish sentiment is holding steady at the moment. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but there is a crossover there, so that could be promising. And the RSI is mid-range, so it's top of the channel, but the RSI is mid-range, so that might give us enough wiggle room on the RSI to get ourselves out of this channel. But don't be surprised if you get some immediate resistance at 2204. If you can get 2204 as support, not only will you be out of the channel, but you'll have a great support zone to start building on to get into the 23s and basically start working your way up every dollar. Okay, so those are 5 stocks between 20 and 30 bucks. I hope that some of those ideas and thoughts were helpful. Please, if you enjoy these videos, hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. The channel is still very young, and those things help YouTube show it to more folks. And in any case, I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you in the next video.